Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Well, all right then. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. How are you doing today? Hopefully you're well and safe. If you're having health trouble, stick in there. Stick with it. Just doing this practice will ameliorate you and inspire you in your practice, and you'll get well soon. Bold claim. If you've been practicing any amount of time, you know. Okay, so today for me is Saturday today, so this is the last talk we'll have on the Nirvana or the MahaParinirvana Sutra, not to be confused with the Hinayana Parinibbana Sutta. Very different early teaching. And maybe, I keep saying that, but maybe I can research some copies, some translations of that, and I can do a series or a video at least on the differences. That might be interesting. I can tell you that just from the two different translations, main translations that is, there are many translations of this Mahayana Sutra, that there are some translations that are obviously contrived and inaccurate, that are much shorter than this translations from, can I remember his name? Dharmaksema? I think that's his name. That's a third the length, and we know that it's bogus because we know that this Nirvana Sutra came on Shakyamuni's deathbed, so it was a question and answer of all of the followers that could get to him, that want to resolve whatever doubt they had left, to start practicing Buddhism, because he was about to cease. And they were all worried, of course, that the teachings would disappear and die with him. This is a consistent concern throughout the history of Buddhism, which is why they started to several elite and scholars started to transpose this verbal oral tradition into scripts, various languages, trying to capture these teachings, wrote them down, and put them into large clay pots that they then buried to keep the teachings alive, right? If you're curious about that, by the way, it's fascinating reading. I should have brought that book in here with me. There's a couple of books that have been published in the recent decade regarding only about 2 decades ago, approximately. Archaeologists have found these big clay pots, and the contents of which some have been very deteriorated because of moisture and the way they folded because they weren't really looking to keep. It's interesting. They were writing all this oral tradition down to save it, to rescue it from obscurity. Not that it was obscure at the time, but Buddhism had gone up and down in India. It even at one point was banned in India. At any rate, these things were found, and some because some archaeologists work for private concerns. Some of these things have gone to laboratories and been rejuvenated somewhat to recover as much of the script as possible, and ended up in private collections or museum collections, academic universities, all sorts of places. So these books talk about this region of northeastern India, which now is like 5 different countries. Gandhara. And the Gandhari scripts, they had their own language that they translated things into, as well as Sanskrit and all the others, and into Chinese from Gandhara. So that area was known as a hub of Buddhism for quite a while. Anyway, it's kind of fascinating how these things were kept, how they were restored, and the little pieces of and the Mahayana was also translated at that time. Although a lot of the teachings that were buried were earlier teachings, there were some Mahayana teachings in there as well. And this begins the great migration of these documents into China and so on and so forth, as well as the oral tradition. So when you read, even in Nichiren, about monks like Tendai and Dengyo and other scholars from Japan and Korea, and well, through Nichiren mainly from Japan, that go to China to study, and Nichiren will talk about hundreds and hundreds of years earlier, informing Tendai and other Chinese scholars that traveled to India. They were most likely learning and studying from oral traditions, as well as script written down that they then had to translate it into Chinese. And as I've said before, often having, I don't know how often, but often having to construct either new words or new sayings in order to capture the conceptual dialogue they were learning from India, with a different language expressing concepts differently. These are the stumbling blocks of cultures and language, which is why one has to be very attentive to the cultural biases, the language bias itself. But Shakyamuni was on top of this. He said, as you study this and you spread it, it should be spread in the language that's familiar to the locals. He wanted this to be a universal teaching, right? And knowing that he was bound to inculcate this biases of different regions, he always advised his practitioners, his students, study all of Buddhism, study it broadly, and in that way, the essential meaning and truths, they'll seep out of whatever language it's being translated into. So even though there may be some misconceptions or weird construations, there's a word, of words, that ultimately, if you read all of it, the truth will out, right? So, which is what we're doing, studying. All right. I don't know what's wrong with my throat this morning. I apologize. Chapter 33 on Bodhisattva Lion's Roar is interesting. I picked up a couple of things out of here, and I thought you might gain something from it. Then there was amongst the congregated a bodhisattva called Lion's Roar. He stood up and adjusted his robe, touched the Buddha's feet, prostrated himself, folded his hands, and said, "Buddha, O honored one," said to the Buddha, Shakyamuni, "I wish to ask a question. Please permit me to ask, O great compassionate one." Then the Buddha said to all the congregation, "O you good men, you now should greatly honor, respect, and praise this bodhisattva. make offerings of incense, flowers of music, necklaces, blah, 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 blah. Why? Because this bodhisattva has in the past greatly accomplished all good deeds. So he's lavishing a lot of praise on Bodhisattva Lion's Roar. And, O world-honored one, the key question in this dialogue, what is the Buddha nature? Why do we speak of Buddha nature? Why do we say the eternal bliss, self, and the pure? If all beings possess the Buddha nature, why is it that they do not see their own Buddha nature? Good question, right? You say we all have Buddha nature, so why are we suffering in samsara? If we all have Buddha nature, why don't we see it immediately, like our fingers, right? We have it. In what do the bodhisattvas of the stage of the 10 bhumis live? I'm not sure. I have to look up bhumis again. I've forgotten. But they're states of awakening. We'll just go with that for now. And why can they not clearly see it, i.e. the Buddha nature? Abiding in what dharma can the Buddha clearly see it? With what eye can the bodhisattvas of the stage of the 10 bhumis not clearly see it? With what eye can the Buddha clearly see it, this Buddha nature? The Buddha said, well said, O good man. If any person pays homage to Dharma, he will be equal to 2 adornments. The one is wisdom, and the other is wheel. The wheel of W-E-A-L, the wheel when you wield a sword, for instance, or you wield your influence, your influence, your life condition of influence, more accurately. If any bodhisattva is perfect in these 2 adornments, wisdom and wheel, he will be able to know the Buddha nature and will know why we say Buddha nature. Also, he can see with what eyes the bodhisattvas of the 10 bhumis see, and with what eyes all Buddhas see. This goes back to, I will repeat myself again because I need you to understand what the meaning of these words is when I talk about the energies. And when we see with samsaric eyes, we see things, possessions, right? Enduring thingness all around us. But with the Buddha eye, we see the thingness, but we don't, I need to come up with a different word. With the Buddha eye, the thingness is a mirage. We see it as such because we see through it to its formations. Does that make sense? It's like a mirage, and he says this all the time. Something that looks like a thing, that's absolutely, there's an oasis, there's a beautiful city with water fountains in the distance. I can see it over the next dune. But when you get there, you realize that was a mirage, that was made of imagination and clinging and deep desire for, because you're dying of thirst in the desert. So, as with the Buddha eye, we see the same things that we always see, but we don't see them as they are, as permanent thingness. We see them as suchnesses of energy that forms them. So we see the construct of the things. And so that releases us from the idea that these things exist permanently, that we own, that we see, that we thingify. Thingification is an imposition of desires to make permanent. This is throughout Buddhism, right? And so we see the same things, but we see them as formed, like clouds, like a mist. You see? Bodhisattva Lion's Roar says, O world-honored one, what is the adornment of wisdom? O good man, the adornment of wisdom refers to what pertains to the first bhumi, up to the 10th bhumi. The adornment of wheel refers to dhanaparamita, unsurpassed giving, up to the prajna wisdom. This is not prajna paramita, transcendent wisdom. Also, the adornment of wisdom is none other than all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The adornment of wheel refers to Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas of the 9 bhumis. So here he is walking that border of understanding, which again I've talked about. There is the transcendent wisdom, which is when we chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, we transcend all the thingness of samsara, of life, right? Life as physical. We transcend that to a deeper mental cognition of the formations of the everything, all phenomena, which is Buddhahood. We see through the veil of permanence to the formations of things. That's why when you really fuse with your mandala, your gohanzon, then when you turn away from the Butsudan, everything seems a little lighter, sometimes even like shiny, because it's apparition. And we see that apparition. And that is your Buddha mind at work. That's the Buddha wisdom, the wisdom of knowing the true nature of all phenomena, you see? And just on the edge of that, on the other side of that line, if you will, is the coursing through life as a human, through the physical life, which is the apparatus for the mind to perceive the true nature of life, right? So this, the wheel, W-E-A-L, is what Shakyamuni says is your samsaric life to influence those all living beings to attain this Buddha wisdom, this knowing of the formations, the non-permanence of things, of being, right? So with that wheel, you are influencing others around you. How engaged you become in that wheeling, that coursing, depends on your level of study and inculcation of that Buddha mind. From the levels of learning to realization to bodhisattva. These are like graduating classes, right? Are you a high school graduate, a university graduate, or a doctrinal candidate? Right? Are you a Shravaka, a Pratyeka Buddha, or a Bodhisattva? It's not even talking about arhats anymore. That Mahayana left that behind early on, because that's just an inferior goal. It doesn't get you here. Okay? Oh, also, good man, the adornment of wheel is the law, Myoho Renge Kyo, of the common mortal, being the created, the astravik, defiled, the existing, that which engenders karmic results, that which has hindrances, and is non-eternal. That's what I just said, right? You now possess these 2 adornments. That is why you effectively put such deep-rooted questions. I, too, possess these adornments, and I shall answer your query. Bodhisattva Mahasattva Lion's Roar said, if bodhisattvas possess these 2 adornments, there can be no asking of 1 or 2 questions. Why do you, the world-honored ones, say that you answer 1 or 2? Why? All things have no number of 1 or 2. To state 1 or 2 is to answer the need of the common mortal. because that's a possession of an identified thing, to number things. When you see everything as formation of energy, there is no one or two. There's just the process, right? The Buddha said, "O good man, if the Bodhisattva did not have one or two adornments, we could not know that there are one or two adornments. If the Bodhisattva has two adornments, we can well know of the one or two kinds. You say that all things are not one or two, but you are wrong. Why? If there is not one or two, how can we say that all things do not have one or two?" O good man, if you say that speaking of one or two relates to the phase of the common mortal, this refers to the Bodhisattva of the grade of the 10 bhumis, which is what he just explained. As a human physical apparatus, you course within the worlds of one or two or three or four or so on, right? We're in that counting, identifying place. This is where the wheel is, W-E-A-L. That's just a matter of timing. Such a person is no common mortal. Why not? 1 refers to nirvana, 2 relates to birth and death. We're walking this border all the time between samsara and enlightenment. To be awakened to enlightenment is to be a living being coursing through the world of samsara with the knowledge, with the experience, with the eye of Buddha mind. That's why this is the only place it can happen. The only place being the physical samsaric world. Why is that? 1 is none other than nirvana, because it is the eternal. Why is 2 birth and death? Because of craving and ignorance. Eternal nirvana is not a phase of the common mortal. The 2 of birth and death is again not a phase of the common mortal. Because of this, being perfect in the 2 adornments, one questions well and answers well. O good man, if you desire to know what the Buddha nature is, listen carefully, listen carefully. I shall now analyze and explain it to you. O good man, the Buddha nature is none other than the all void of the Paramatha Satya, ultimate truth. The all void of Paramatha Satya is wisdom. We say all void. This does not refer to no void, any voidness, nor non-void. Knowledge, jhana, sees the void, and the void refers to all births and deaths. The non-void refers to great nirvana, and the non-self is nothing but the birth and death. This self refers to great nirvana. Now, I'll caution you, the translator here is obviously influenced by Chan and Zen and this idea of voidness. I really, really dislike the word void. I think it's a mistranslation of what Shakyamuni is talking about here. And in other parts, he doesn't use that word. He uses shunyata, or emptiness. Again, that whole thing of the cloud, the mist of the formations of reality. The reality in our physical apparatus is stuff, is thingness. But with our Buddha eye, we understand that that is a mirage, that that's not actually what everything is. It's actually formed of energies. And we understand the equanimity of that. It is not born, because it never becomes the thing we perceive in the physical world. Therefore, if it's not born, it doesn't die. It's just energy in transformations. Okay? If one sees the sunyata, but does not see the non-sunyata, in other words, you're not in the physical apparatus, then you're not here. So, we do not speak of this as the middle path. Now, do you understand the middle path? It's like Occam's razor, right? You're either awakened or physical, or you're walking the middle path. It's not like Occam's razor in the meaning of Occam's razor. I'm just trying to give you a line. That on one side of the line is the physical apparatus world. On the other side of the line is your Buddha wisdom, your knowledge, your insight into the formations. And the formations go on. There's no time there. But on this side, the physical is all time related. It's an apparatus to perceive the other. But you can't perceive in the other what the other is. You can perceive it only by being on this side, the physical side, and experiencing the formations as to what they can be thingified, apparatus, methods for realizing. All these words, all saying the same thing, that the basis for all physicality, all phenomena, is existing in the energy. But the energy doesn't have a mechanism to perceive itself. So the only way you can perceive the energy is to have this apparatus to then look over and see. But as a bodhisattva, you course on the line. You course in the physical while maintaining the knowledge. So you become unattached. You don't fall into the apparatus, but you utilize the apparatus in order to see enlightenment. And because you are that middle path, you affect everything you encounter on the samsaric side. Therefore, by your very nature, you're a teacher, an example, a facilitator. You give example to the others. You have will, influence. Do you see? And so the best thing you can do as being that person, is to let the masses, the other samsaric beings, not only be influenced by you, but facilitated. You tell them how to chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, how to realize the other side, the Buddha, the liberated, the energy, the formations of, so that you can rescue them. They do not even know, as they are suffering, what it is that they're doing in order to stay mired in the rapids, in the suffering. So only by cluing them in can they then grow the seed of enlightenment, grow the desire, the bodhisattva citta, right? Or bodhisattva citta, however you want to pronounce it. The mind of desire for enlightenment. If they don't know it exists, they can't aspire to it. And you, as an example, motivate them to know, how is it that you're so liberated, that you have this life condition? I don't know what it is, but when you walk into a room, right? You ever hear that? And now you know. Myoho Renge Kyo. The middle path is the Buddha nature. For this reason, the Buddha nature is eternal and there is no change. It's always energy. As ignorance overspreads them, all beings are unable to see. The Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddhas see the sunyata of all things, but they do not see the not sunyata. Or they see the non-self of all things, but they do not see the self, the actual energy field that is the self. Because of this, they are unable to gain the sunyata of Paramatha Satya. Since they fail to gain the all sunyata of Paramatha Satya, they fail to enact the middle path. Since there is no middle path, there is no seeing of the Buddha nature. So the Buddha nature itself that we talk about all the time, it's kind of a contradiction. There's Buddha and nature. Nature is physical reality. Buddha is energy. What's Buddha nature? Puts you right in the middle. The middle path. Follow? It's really simple. I don't mean to belittle anyone who's struggling with it, believe me, myself included. What I'm saying is that when you discover what's going on here and how Myoho Renge Kyo is life itself, is the energy of the engine of the universe, as I've often said. Once you really start to know that, right, your bhumis continue to grow in knowledge, in potential. When you read this stuff, suddenly the words, the strength, the shouting of the words that wants to capture your attention starts to die down a little bit, and the meaning, the crests of these waves that are words, start to blend into an ocean of information. And that's when it hits you. Oh gosh, it's been there all along. This is so simple. Well, it's not simple to get there. Do you understand? Since there is no middle path, there is no seeing of the Buddha nature, because the Buddha nature is the middle path, Buddha nature. There are three seeings of the middle path, i.e. constituting, what is that? Constituting the middle path. The one is the definitely blissful action, the mind only, or the energy of formations. The second is the definitely sorrowful action, that recognition of the apparatus as such an obstacle. The third is the sorrow-bliss action, the middle path. Bliss, sorrow. Why is it sorrow? Because it's full of angst, suffering, pain, stress, anxiety. Because it's anchored on thingness, which is itself mirage. So if your mind reaches that conclusion that everything is formations, not things, then you can look around you to all of those who are still adhering to thingness. Money, cars, sex, on and on and on and on and on. It's crushing them. It used to crush you. But less and less as we practice, are we affected by these things. We still use them, we're in them, we're living, and we're in samsara. But our mind has shifted away from our profound attachments, desires, to understanding that all of it is dreamland, it's clouds, and as much of a release as that is, wow, you start to see things as they truly are. Buddha, you're still in nature, and you see how others are in nature, and trying to interact with you from that. We walk the middle path. We want to, I hate the word rescue, we want to open the eyes of others, right? Nichiren, the opening of the eyes. With a mandala, open your eyes, don't meditate like this. Open your eyes, actively invoke Buddha. In that way, we have this simple tool that immediately invokes that Buddha mind. The moment you get someone to come over and sit with you and chant, You have plugged into something they've never known. And now it's on them. Are they going to endeavor to know this better? Are you a fine example? Do they run from you because they're just not ready? Their karma pulls them away? To what degree will you continue to influence them? Bodhisattva path, middle path, Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Right? Just a little bit more. It's a big book. We say definitely blissful action. This is as in the case of the so-called Bodhisattva Mahasattva, who, pitying all beings, lives in a Vichy hell and yet feels things as of the bliss of the third dhyana heaven. We say definitely sorrowful action, referring to all common mortals, ignorant of their Buddha nature. We say sorrow bliss action. This alludes to Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. The Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas experience sorrow and bliss and gain the thought of the middle path. For this reason, though a person possesses the Buddha nature, he cannot see it well. O good man, you say that we speak of the Buddha nature. O good man, the Buddha nature is the seed of the middle path, of the unsurpassed enlightenment of all Buddhas. Also, there are three kinds of way, which are low, top, and middle. The low refers to the non-eternal of Brahma, in which one mistakes the non-eternal for the eternal. The top refers to the non-eternal of birth and death, which people wrongly conceive as eternal. The three jewels are eternal. The three jewels that are eternal are wrongly conceived of as eternal, non-eternal. Why do we call it the top? Because it one well gains unsurpassed enlightenment. The middle is the all empty of Paramatha Satya. This sees the non-eternal as the non-eternal and the eternal as the eternal. He keeps saying all void, but the sunyata of Paramatha Satya is not made, designated, low. Why not? For it is that which all common mortals do not have. We do not call it top. Why not? Because it is the top. Another recension gives low here. Either meaning is not clear. That's K. Yamamono. The way of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is neither top nor low. We call it the middle path. There are two kinds of original abode of birth and death. The one is ignorance, the other is clinging to what exists. That's samsara, right? In between these two are the sufferings of birth, old age, illness, and death. We call this the middle path. This middle path well destroys birth and death. That is why we call it, or say, middle. That is why we call the teaching of the middle path the Buddha nature. Therefore, the Buddha nature is eternal, energy, bliss, and self, and the pure. All beings do not see this. Hence, there is for them no eternity, no bliss, no self, and no purity. The Buddha nature is not non-eternal, not non-bliss, not non-self, and not non-purity. There is a poor man in whose house there is a storehouse of treasure, but he cannot see it. Anyway, this is going to go on and on and on and on. The Lion's Roar, there's several more chapters. So, I recommend you read it. It's very insightful, but read it with the understanding that the middle path is the path we practice in front of our Butsudan, in front of this mandala. All of these things we sit in front of mandala. This is all the world of samsara, of possessions, of arguments whether or not we're eternal beings and have a soul and go on, or we die at the end, it's all over. That's our karmic struggle of samsara. And in the meantime, we're clinging and clawing at everything we see to amass enough stuff that we convince ourselves we truly exist. This is samsara. It's torture. It is, as he just said, and I've often quoted this before, this is the Avicii hell. Because of the clinging. But when we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo opens the Gohanzen in our samsaric existence. Our mind separates from the apparatus, and that mind can see over the edge to an eternal, constant reality of energy without formation. The moment there's space-time, there's formation. The moment there's formation, there's space-time. So we, earthly beings, are not eternal. But the Buddha mind, the energy that forms all of living beings, that, undifferentiated, unformed, that is eternal. Because, as we say in Gongyo, it is beginningless time. That's one of those word riddles. How can something be beginningless if it's a form of time? And therefore, how can it be time if it's beginningless? Because it is not. But it's not, because not would mean it isn't something else. It isn't formed. But the formations aren't permanent. They're not real. They're just imaginings. So they themselves are not. So word game. We see this throughout Buddhism, right? So the truth is that all of this is formations of energy. And if we know that truth, if we constantly course in our minds of that truth, then we can truly partake of this existence without the highs and lows, the stresses, the anxiety. We can just be in Disneyland, right? As Nichiren says, enjoy what there is to enjoy. Suffer what there is to suffer. But at the end of the day, Myoho Renge Kyo. Don't be attached. Don't invest your identity in these things. You're giving them too much credit. Your true self is none of it. Your true self can observe it, be in it, know it for what it is, and when you go extinct, when you leave this form, no harm, no foul. Nothing has changed. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Life is, the human existence is here for us to see the wonder of the whole process of life. That's it. Everything else is constructed. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. The middle. That's where we stand. That's where we course. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. You guys are awesome. You know this. You experience this. As your confidence elevates and you're more and more solid in your conviction about how true this is, meanwhile, your apparatus life is changing around you. You can't even perceive how much it's changing. But every now and again, you get a glimpse and you go, man, my life is so different. And yet here I am. Don't let that pull you down. That's just a reminder that you're in the middle. And the more you're convinced of that life, that middle path, the more you will influence those around you. And I would hope that at some point your conviction will spill out. Man, you've got to experience this. You don't even know. You really need, and people will seek you out. You may even get annoyed. I remember that stage. I'd be shopping in the supermarket, and people would come up. I remember one guy in particular right now. I have no idea who this guy was. And he came up and challenged me. Hi, who are you? How can you say da-da-da-da? And he's asking me questions about the practice. I don't know how he found me. I don't know why. In a supermarket, he starts grilling me. And every time he asked me a question, the answers just flowed out of me. I mean, I was giggling. Literally. I would answer him and I would laugh. I can't just... There it is. There's your answer. And he would get so frustrated. And he'd walk down the aisle and leave me. And I'd go, wow, that was a weird moment. And I'd go around the other aisle, and here he comes at me again. How do you say this? Blah, 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 blah. Answer. And he'd get frustrated to leave me again. It happened half a dozen times. To the point where he couldn't stick with what he thought he knew, because the answers I was giving him were just so plain, open obviousness. He couldn't argue them anymore. And he watched me from near the exits where this was I forget what store it was, but anyway, he was standing near the clerk's station, and he just muttering to himself, looking up, seeing me, and going, and he just wasn't coming to see me anymore. Until the girl I was with at the time, we had made some Threefold pamphlets about Namo Myoho Renge Kyo and so forth, and I'm not a big fan of that kind of shakabuku. The shoji was working tremendously, but at any rate, she felt motivated and inspired, and she gave him a pamphlet, and he started reading through it, and we were going through the checkout line, and we get out of the market, and he staged this deliberately. Obviously, he was so upset. He waited till we came out through the automatic doors so he could be in view, and threw the pamphlet into a trash can and stormed away. Oh man! I mean, you know what? I would guarantee, this has been decades ago, I would guarantee that he's practicing. He has to be. He had such a strong, inquisitive mind, and the thing that was so brilliant about that is that I knew, as frustrated as he was asking good questions, and he was hearing the answers. He wasn't just spouting negativity. He was angry that the answers I gave him made sense to him. That's how I knew. Oh man, this guy's going to be a powerful bodhisattva, right? Because he has his conviction. And he's asking questions. You can't answer this. Bam, bam, bam. And then I'd answer it, and I'd laugh because, oh my God, I answered that so well. It wasn't premeditated at all. It was just because I was constantly practicing. I just knew instantly what to say. My Buddha nature was at work. I witnessed it. And I laughed at the words that came out of my mouth because they surprised me. And it just shut him down. Not shut him down as in, shut up, stupid. It was like, oh, damn, that's a good answer. Right? So all this realization is going on. It was amazing. Anyway, I just had to share that with you. That, to me, is a personal example of that middle path. You don't have to look for it. It will happen. It will seek you out. And I say this also because I want to save you some grief. Sometimes that will happen and it will scare the bejesus out of you, right? But don't let it. Have confidence. Chant. Oh, he's going to come at me again. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Please keep it together. Answer, ask questions. Blah, blah, blah. Wow. That just happened. It didn't even come to me to answer correctly. It just happened. Right? Let it flow. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. All right. Getting carried away. That's enough minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening, downloading the podcast. Like, subscribe. Please subscribe and share. It's one way to spread this teaching. Share it. Comment. Let me know what you think. If you have your own experiences, I'd love to hear it. Put them on here. If you're shy about putting things online, I totally understand. That's why I offer my email, tlksylvain@gmail. Let me know what's going on with you. Questions you may have. Success stories. I love it all. It will inspire other avenues of study for me to share with you. So I always love to hear from you guys. In the meantime, take care of your health. You can't have a middle path if you're sickly and you can't, right? So, take care of your health. Be kind to yourself. We all make mistakes. You can't be beating yourself up all the time. And but in the same respect, be kind to others. They're either struggling in their practice or they don't even know about the practice. Have compassion. They just don't know yet. Okay? I love you guys. You be well. And tomorrow we'll do Gangyo and we'll start. I don't even know what we're going to start. We'll start something else. All right? Bye for now. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo.